Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the California Privacy Protection Agency Board. It's December 19th, 2024 at 9:31 a.m. My name is Jennifer Urban. I'm the chairperson of the board, and I'm pleased to be here in person with the board and members of the public in Sacramento, and to welcome many of you via Zoom. Before we get started with the substance of the meeting, as usual, I have some logistical announcements. First, I'd like to ask that everyone please check that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking and that you have turned off or silenced your cell phone, which I'm doing right now, to avoid interruption. Thank you for doing that. And third, and importantly, this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being held in a hybrid format. My fellow board members and members of the CPPA staff are here in person, and some members of the public, and I know most members of the public are joining remotely. This format, the hybrid format, does create technical complexity, so if we have any technical kinks during the meeting, we'll pause the meeting and address the issue. Today's meeting is being held in person at the Cannabis Control Appeals Panel hearing room in Sacramento, and we really appreciate the CCAP team's hospitality. So some additional logistics and meeting participation process. Today's meeting will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act as required by law. We will proceed through the agenda, which is available as a handout here in Sacramento and also on the CPPA website. You can look under meetings and events and click on the materials for today's meeting. Materials for the meeting are also available as handouts here and on the CPPA website in the same place. You may notice board members accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They are using the devices solely to access board meeting materials. After each agenda item, there will be an opportunity for questions and discussion by board members. I will also ask for public comment on each agenda item. Each speaker for public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. We also have an agenda item on the schedule for general public comment. That is agenda item number 3 today. On that point, I want to note that we have once again reordered the agenda to hear general public comments at the beginning of the meeting to help people plan their time. Since we don't always know how long agenda items are going to take, it's been difficult sometimes for stakeholders to be able to ascertain when they need to join the meeting to make their comment. And so we've put the general public comment item at the top of the meeting. We have members. So in any case, if you would like to watch the entire meeting, of course you're welcome. You can also make public comment in a little while. If you're attending via Zoom and you wish to speak on an item, please wait until I call for public comment and then allow staff to prepare for Zoom public comment. Then use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, of your Zoom screen, and the moderator will see you. If you wish to speak on an item and you're joining by phone, please press star 9 on your phone, and that will show the moderator you're raising your hand. Our moderator will call your name when it is your turn and request that you unmute yourself for comment at that time. If you're using the webinar, you can use the unmute feature on the screen, and those dialing by phone can press star 6 to unmute. When your comment is completed, the moderator will mute you. Please note that the board will not be able to see you, only hear your voice. For this reason, it's helpful if you identify yourself, but this is entirely voluntary, and you can also input a pseudonym when you log into the meeting via Zoom. If you're attending in person and wish to speak on an item, please wait for me to call for public comment, then move toward the podium in front of the board here and speak when you are called. As with the Zoom attendees, it's helpful if you identify yourself, but this is entirely voluntary. Please do speak into the microphone so that everyone participating remotely can hear you and so that your remarks will be recorded in the meeting record. As I mentioned, for a hybrid meeting format is a little bit technically complex. First, I'd like to thank our moderator, Serena Marzian, for managing all the technical aspects of today's meeting. Second, I'll explain what to do if you're participating remotely and you experience an issue with the remote meeting. For example, the audio drops or the video drops or something. If that happens, please email info@cppa.ca.gov, India, November, Foxtrot, Oscar, cppa.charliealpha.gov. And that will be monitored throughout the meeting, and people will respond if there's an issue. We'll pause the meeting if that comes up to let the technical staff work on the issue and restart the meeting or rejoin the meeting when it's working again. I'd also like to remind everybody that the board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is my intent always to ask for public comment prior to the board voting on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment and you wish to speak on the item, please let us know by using the raise your hand functions or coming to the podium and raising your hand, and the moderator will recognize you. Once again, speakers are limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. The other limitation is if you're speaking on an agenda item, both board members and members of the public must contain their comments to that agenda item, with the exception of the general public comment item number 3, when the public can comment on items outside the agenda. Finally, we can also talk about items to be discussed during future board meetings during the agenda item for that purpose, which is number 9 today. We will take breaks as needed today, including one for lunch. I will announce each break, and we will leave the meeting open, and return when we are finished with the break. Please relatedly note that the 10th item on the agenda is a closed session item. I'll announce the item and the board will leave this room to go into closed session. The Zoom will stay open. When we're finished with our closed session discussion, we will return to public meeting. My many thanks to the board members for their service today and to everyone working to make the meeting possible. I'd like to thank Mr. Laird for being here in his capacity as our general counsel, and Mr. Ashkan Soltani in his capacity as our executive director, and all of the deputies who will be presenting today. I'd like to thank again our moderator, Ms. Serena Marzian, and ask her to please conduct the roll call.
Board Member Lay.
Present.
Board Member Liebert.
Present.
Board Member McTaggart.
Present.
Board Member Worth.
Present.
Chair Urban.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have 5 present members and no absences.
Thank you very much. The board has established a quorum. I would like to let the board members know that we'll be taking a roll call vote on any action items. And actually, before we start our first full agenda item, I'm going to pause the meeting and take a quick break. Mr. Laird, could we get your counsel for just a second? Thank you very much, Mr. Laird. And with that, let's continue on with the agenda. For agenda item number 2, Mr. Soltani, can we have your attention, please? Agenda item number 2 is an item to recognize distinguished service by our inaugural executive director, Ashkan Soltani. It is a delightful item, and I'm very pleased to handle it. I'd like to invite Ms. Mahoney and Ms. Garcia to come up. We're going to do a little like set changing here, and bear with us. Let's go. So as announced in our November 8th meeting, our intrepid and brilliant and dowdy executive director is going to be stepping down in the next few weeks. We are pleased today to announce some formal recognition for his tremendous vision, leadership, and service to the agency, to California, and to consumer privacy. First, I am delighted and grateful to present a resolution sponsored by California legislators, Assembly Josh Lowenthal, Senator Josh Becker, and Senator Tom Umberg. Ms. Garcia and Ms. Mahoney will display this while I read it out. By the Honorable Josh Lowenthal, 69th Assembly District, the Honorable Josh Becker, 13th Senatorial District, and the Honorable Thomas J. Umberg, 34th Senatorial District, relative to commending Ashkan Soltani. Whereas Ashkan Soltani, a distinguished California resident who has worked for more than 3 decades to advance Americans' privacy and security, which included serving as chief technologist for the Federal Trade Commission, has served as executive director for the California Privacy Protection Agency since 2021, and in recognition of his upcoming departure from the agency, it is appropriate to highlight his many achievements and extend to him the highest congratulations. And whereas for 3 years, Ashkan Soltani has provided invaluable leadership to the California Privacy Protection Agency, which stands as the first authority in the United States with full administrative powers focused on protecting consumer privacy. And during his tenure, he has steered the agency toward making significant advances in a very short time, such as expanding the organization from a single employee to a fully staffed entity comprising 7 divisions that brought together some of the nation's top privacy experts. And whereas devoted to protecting California residents, Ashkan has led the California Privacy Protection Agency in finalizing a rulemaking package that added protections to the California Consumer Privacy Act, the CCPA, in alignment with the voter-approved Proposition 24, the ballot initiative to amend and expand the CCPA, which secured strong privacy rights for Californians that have been the model for other states to follow. And he has continued to lead the agency in pursuing additional rulemaking packages to implement voters' wishes in Proposition 24 and further California consumer privacy rights. And whereas, as an integral member of the agency, Ashkan has played a key role in shaping and implementing the DELETE Act, a role that included working to build a first of its kind data broker delete request and opt-out platform, which once operational will make it easier for California consumers to delete their personal information from data brokers' databases. And he has also prioritized building a strong enforcement division, which launched a complaint portal, opened dozens of ongoing investigations, brought multiple enforcement actions against data brokers, conducted investigative sweeps, and issued enforcement advisories. And whereas in his role as executive director, Ashkan has helped initiate a statewide public awareness campaign and the privacy.ca.gov website, which serves as a resource to help consumers better understand their privacy rights and how to exercise them. And beyond his leadership of the agency, he has worked with other states and international data protection authorities to facilitate collaboration efforts and information sharing, which has enabled the agency to sign partnerships with data protection authorities in Europe and Asia and secured California's admittance as a voting member of the Global Privacy Assembly. And whereas Ashkan Soltani is genuinely respected, admired, and appreciated, by those who have had the opportunity to know and work with him and to reap the benefits of his exceptional spirit and devotion to making a difference in communities throughout the state of California and beyond. Now, therefore, be it resolved by Assembly Member Josh Lowenthal and Senators Josh Becker and Thomas J. Umberg that Ashkan Soltani be commended for his outstanding contributions toward furthering Californians' privacy rights through his tireless work to build the California Privacy Protection Agency into a world-class institution and extended sincere best wishes for his continued successes in protecting consumer privacy. Members' Resolution Number 112, dated this 19th day of December 2024, by the Honorable Josh Lowenthal, Josh Becker, and Thomas J. Umberg. Yeah. Yeah. There's more to come. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so that's number one. Second, I am thrilled to present a small gift, but on behalf of all the staff at the agency and the board, a keepsake of your time here that we hope will remind you of your accomplishments whenever you see it. Sort of a deal block, but it's going to have to cover like all the deals and all of the accomplishments. So we hope that this will be meaningful to you, and we're very happy and grateful to present this to you on behalf of the whole agency, all of us. Yeah. Yeah. And then last, but I hope not least, I'm delighted to present for consideration to the board a California Privacy Protection Agency board resolution recognizing some of your accomplishments and service in this role. I will read the resolution while Ms. Garcia and Ms. Mahoney display, or Ms. Mahoney, Ms. White display it to everyone, and then the board will discuss, we'll take public comment, and we will vote. The resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by Ashkan Soltani. Whereas Ashkan Soltani, as the founding executive director of the California Privacy Protection Agency, CPPA, played a historic role in establishing the first state authority in the United States solely dedicated to enforcing consumer privacy rights and data protection, setting a foundation that will benefit Californians for generations to come. And whereas Mr. Soltani brought unmatched expertise in privacy, consumer protection, and technology regulation, drawing from his prior roles, including as chief technologist at the Federal Trade Commission, to guide the agency's mission with precision and integrity. And whereas under his visionary leadership, the agency grew rapidly and with excellence, establishing 7 divisions and hiring a dedicated, highly skilled team of over 45 employees. And whereas under Mr. Soltani's leadership, the agency gathered robust public input and completed substantial rulemaking to implement and strengthen the California Consumer Privacy Act. Whereas Mr. Soltani prioritized consumer rights by advancing the creation of the data broker deletion request and opt-out platform, streamlining Californians' ability to safeguard their personal information. And whereas under Mr. Soltani's leadership, the CPPA Enforcement Division issued its first enforcement advisories to promote compliance on key principles like data minimization and the avoidance of dark patterns, while also supporting enforcement actions, including the agency's first data broker compliance sweep, successfully securing settlements under the DELETE Act, reinforcing California's commitment to transparency and accountability. And whereas Mr. Soltani strengthened California's role as a global leader in privacy enforcement through strategic collaboration with domestic and international privacy authorities, securing California's place as the first U.S. state admitted as a full voting member of the Global Privacy Assembly. And whereas Mr. Soltani demonstrated a commitment to public trust and service by launching the state's agency's statewide public outreach program and consumer education initiatives. And whereas his tenure leaves behind a legacy of diligence, innovation, and unwavering commitment to protecting the privacy rights of Californians. And whereas Mr. Soltani's colleagues on the agency board recognize his extraordinary contributions and wish him success in all his future endeavors, therefore, be it resolved that we, the California Privacy Protection Agency Board, extend our heartfelt appreciation for Mr. Ashkan Soltani's distinguished service to the state of California. We recognize his exceptional leadership, vision, and dedication in advancing consumer privacy protections and shaping the future of data protection. The board wishes Mr. Soltani continued success in his next chapter, dated this 19th day of December, 2024. Now we actually have to discuss it though and vote on it. So this one's a little different.
Yeah, just echoing what I said at the last meeting, I wholeheartedly support the resolution. And, we've been so fortunate to have you for these 3 years. And look, you got that great memento as effort in repayment for 16-hour days for 3 years straight, 7 days a week. What you have accomplished, along with the early board members, because I should give a nod to them too, because that was a lot of hard work, to Vincent and the chair here. But what you guys accomplished was unbelievable. And when we were writing the initiative, we had no idea how difficult it was going to be to stand up an agency. And had we known, we might have put different things in there. But getting something going from scratch was really tremendous. And your unflagging determination to do the right thing was really, I think, one of the secrets to getting this thing established, because it would have been easy to fold or give up, and you just kept going. And you've assembled a tremendous team here. And I think how things begin is so important to how they keep on going, and the momentum that is established. So I'm just profoundly grateful that you chose to accept the job and take it and apply for it and keep on going. And we are lucky to have had you for as long as we've had you. So thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. McTaggart. Other comments or questions? Mr. Worth?
Yeah, there's only so much I can fit on an 8.5 by 11 plaque, right? But I think a couple things that were just said, the tireless work and how grateful we all are for what you've done. Personally, you spent a lot of time with me, bringing me along in this endeavor, so I really appreciate all of that. So just thank you, and I wholeheartedly support the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Worth. Mr. Lay?
Yeah, I've said a lot of this last time and to you privately, but I'm so grateful for the amount of time you've put into this agency, to working with me to understand the issues. And I know it hasn't been easy, and I know you've put in probably more time than you should have. And I'm just so happy for what you've built here, and excited that you get some time off to relax after building a great agency. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lay. Mr. Liebert?
Well, as you know, I'm the new kid on the block, and closer. Okay, this is weird. Okay, so I wanted to just acknowledge that from the moment I joined the board, you have been so incredibly helpful and always open to my many questions, and I'm very grateful for that. We heard a whole bunch of whereases, and the amazing thing is we could add another 20 or 30 of them. I know that you are a California and frankly an international treasure on these issues. So if you think we're done seeking your counsel in the future, of course, that's not the case. And I really want to especially compliment you for the team that you helped put together with the leadership here. It's a real testament, I think, to any leader that when they finally do leave, they're leaving a group of people who can continue the work robustly and so competently. And for that, I really do congratulate you. Just a tremendous job, Ashkan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. I'll keep my own remarks really short and echo a little bit of what has been said already. I think Mr. McTaggart is right that ignorance can be a strength sometimes, but often when then confronted with reality, people dial down the expectations, or they reduce the goals, or they give up entirely. And that simply doesn't comport with your approach at all. So we are now in a position where the agency is incredibly strong and is moving from strength to strength. I want to also echo what Mr. Liebert said about the excellence of the staff. The resolution from the board says that you built the agency rapidly and with excellence. And that was a very carefully and thoughtfully chosen word. We have just the best staff that I've ever seen anywhere in terms of their dedication and their expertise and their alacrity. And we did that with without any reputation in state government. And that really comes down, Ashkan, to your efforts, your own reputation, the reputation of the people you recruited. And it makes the agency just an absolute force to be reckoned with. And I think it's one of your many major accomplishments. Secondly, I would like to echo what both resolutions said about international and national partnerships. That is something that can easily fall by the wayside when there are a million things to do and fires burning everywhere. And you have always made time to begin and to culture those relationships. This is a complex area. It is an area with a lot of interest, a lot of valid interests, and it's a difficult path to navigate. And the only way that we can do that is by connecting with experts in the area and talking it through. And that is really appreciated. So those are just two things for me out of many. And I kind of have to stop because I'm not much of a tearful person, but this is quite an emotional moment. But I'm tremendously grateful, and I would like you to know that if you didn't realize already, that you can look back on this as a true legacy. In a moment, then, I will ask for a motion to adopt this resolution in recognition and appreciation of distinguished service by Ashkan Soltani on this, the 20th day of December, 2024, with the gratitude of the California Privacy Protection Agency Board. And may I have such a motion?
I would so move.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Lay. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Lay and a second from Mr. McTaggart. Is there any public comment on this item?
This is for agenda item number 2. If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 2. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marzian, Ms. Marzian. I apologize. And thank you very much to the board and again to Mr. Soltani. With that, I will ask Ms. Marzian if you could please conduct the roll call vote on the resolution.
Yes. Board Member Lay,
Aye.
Board Member Liebert,
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart,
Aye.
Board Member Worth,
Aye.
Chair Urban.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeses.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marzian and the board. The motion passes with a vote of 5-0, and we will prepare the resolution for you, Mr. Soltani, so that you have that as a keepsake as well, with our many thanks.
I'm without words. Thank you all so very much. As someone who, as you all know me, likes to be on top of everything, I will just say I had no, I knew there was a recognition, but I had no expectation to the degree that you all went. And I'm so blown away by your kind words. Blown away by your kind words. As I said, as someone who prides themselves on being on top of everything that's going at the agency, I had no idea the extent to which you all had, you and staff and the senators. I'm so incredibly grateful for all of the recognition, all the kind words to the board, to staff, to Senator Umberg, to Senator Lowenthal, to Senator Becker, our alleged deputy for organizing. It's just been such an incredible honor to be entrusted to do this job, and the support of the board, both present and past board members. As you all said, I could not have done this without the incredible team that you see before me. And I appreciate all the praise, but there was a lot that was even done by our chief deputy, even prior to my arrival, by the board members, by Chair Urban, by the folks at BCSH, by DCA, by DGS, and a number of other agencies. So while I appreciate all the recognition, it was truly a team effort and truly speaks to the excellence of everyone here in the room and everyone at the agency and everyone supporting the agency. And I'm so incredibly grateful to have been able to do this work. It's bittersweet to leave. As folks know, I would love to continue to do this work, but it also felt like the right time for me to step down. And I feel like part of that was that we do have the incredible leadership and team that I can take a break and I can take a little bit of my foot off the gas, which is something that I desperately have needed. So you know, it's tremendous how much you all have supported me and how staff has supported me and how so incredibly grateful for all of the kind words, the opportunity to do this. And I agree that we are kind of a model for hopefully a number of states, hopefully even internationally. And so I continue to hopefully not even hopefully I will continue to be in this ecosystem, and I hope to be involved in some way in the privacy space, and hope to see from a distance what amazing work the agency will continue to do. Honestly, I'm really excited for what's in store next year. You all will see there's a lot of other irons in the fire, in addition to rulemaking and enforcement, that are still to come to fruition. And again, that speaks to the hard work, not just of me, but really the staff, because at this point, it's the staff really delivering on all of the vision that we had. I agree that if we had known, I would have definitely done things differently. It's just like there's, but you have no idea in government. And that's what's been part of the fun, is learning and having the support and of the board and the team to figure all that out. So thank you all so much. Thank you again to the senators. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to everyone. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Sultani. I want to thank Ms. Mahoney for her work helping on getting the resolution, and staff in Assemblymember Lowenthal's office, especially, and the other offices, and Mr. Lay for his contributions to the resolution. So thank you, Mr. Sultani. More to come. And with that, we'll move to agenda item number 3, which is the item I mentioned earlier of public comment for items not on the agenda. As a reminder, I do need to let everyone know again that the board may not discuss or act on any matter raised during this public comment session, except to consider whether to place the matter on the agenda at a future meeting. And we have an agenda item for that later in the day. Before we begin taking comments today, I also have a special note that I need to make. I'd like to note that the agency is currently in the midst of a formal public rulemaking period for proposed regulations concerning updates to the CCPA regulations, cybersecurity audits, risk assessments, automated decision-making technology, and insurance companies. And today's board meeting is not a public hearing for receiving public comments on these draft regulations. So I would encourage audience members to refrain from making comments specifically about the proposed regulations during this agenda item. Instead, I encourage any members of the public wishing to provide comments on the proposed regulations to submit your comments in writing as specified in the rulemaking notice available at cppa.ca.gov /regulations, or alternatively to make them orally at the public hearing for the purpose, which will be held in the same room on January 14th, 2025 from 2 to 6 p.m. And we'll have a hybrid option for that hearing as well. And so you can elect to participate in person or virtually. That will be the last day we'll accept public comments on the formal rulemaking opening period. So just a reminder that when the rulemaking is open, it is best to submit your comments in writing or during the public hearing so that the board, the agency, and you all have your comments in hand in the best possible and most useful form. And at this time, then, I will call for any other public comments on items not described on today's agenda. Ms. Marzan, are there any public comments?
This is for agenda item 2, and we do have a hand raised. Agenda item number 3. And if you'd like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. It looks like our first will be Benjamin. I'm going to allow you to speak. At this time, you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, so please begin as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Ben Isaacson. I am an attorney specializing in data privacy who works with a number of California registered data brokers. These comments are not being made on behalf of any specific companies, and I have published additional written comments on LinkedIn with the CPPA tagged for anyone interested to further review. I have 2 requests for the CPPA to consider following the actions taken at the November 8th meeting. The first is a request to delay and or modify the implementation of the data broker registry fee increase. And the second, if the chair would grant me a bit more time, is a request for clarification regarding the SB 362 regulations related to the expanded definition of what constitutes a data broker. With respect to the data broker registry fee increase from $400 to $6,600, SB 362 requires the CPPA to establish the data broker registry fund to offset the reasonable cost of establishing, maintaining, and providing access to the accessible deletion mechanism. The $6,200 registry fee increase approved by the board on November 8th is a sudden, surprising, and significant financial burden on many data brokers, and the materials presented to justify this significant increase were vague guesstimates with additional unnecessary expenditures that calls into question the reasonableness of the proposed $4.4 million budget. Specifically, the board should reevaluate the budget allocation based on the following facts. The board should publicly release all information associated with its request for ideas budget analysis in order for potential vendors to bid on the request for proposals. The board should publicly state whether the vendor award will be based on a lowest responsible, lowest qualified responsible, or highest scored responsible bidder as defined by California standards. If the CPPA receives a proposal by a credible vendor that meets all of the criteria specified, then the CPPA should be required to accept a lowest responsible proposal. The CPPA staff response on November 8th to the question of a budget surplus was vague and insufficient. Any budget surplus based on 2025 collected registration or enforcement fees should not be awarded as a subsidiary to 2026 registrants, but rather returned pro rata to the registered data brokers who are funding the creation of the deletion mechanism. Finally, the board should publicly release its analysis of why $1.3 million of the deletion mechanism budget is being allocated for 2 non-technical positions, including a full-time attorney. Based on this information, I am requesting that the CPPA board schedule a meeting before January 1st and vote on the following courses of action. 1, maintain the existing $400 data broker registration renewal and issue a special assessment of the registered data brokers following completion of the procurement release based on a lowest responsible acceptance criteria for selection of the deletion mechanism vendor. 2, alternatively, the board could place all registration fees and enforcement revenue into an escrow.
That is your time. Thank you very much. If there are any other members of the public who'd like to speak at this time, please go ahead and raise your hand using Zoom's raised hand feature or by pressing *6 if you're joining us by phone. Again, this is for agenda item number 3. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any additional hands at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Marcion, and thank you for that comment. At this time, we will turn to agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is our regularized legislation update and agency proposals from CPPA's Deputy Director of Policy and Legislation, Ms. Maureen Mahoney. As a reminder, we do this at this time of year so as to hear a report on the previous legislative session and to consider any CPPA proposals in advance of the upcoming legislative session. I'll ask you to please turn your attention to the materials provided for this agenda item. We have, I believe, a memo and a presentation. And Ms. Mahoney, please go ahead whenever you're ready. Okay, testing.
Hey, thank you, Chairperson Urban, board members. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a legislative update and present staff's recommended legislative proposal. And before I member of the policy and legislation team, specialist. She's based in Los Angeles, so couldn't be here today, but I'm really grateful to have her on the team. And next slide, please. For this item, testing. Okay. For this item, I'll do several things. First, I'll provide an update on the federal landscape in light of the election. Second, provide an overview of the 2024 California legislative session with respect to privacy and AI. And at the end, I'll present for board consideration a recommended legislative proposal, an update of AB 3048, the opt-out preference signal bill that the agency sponsored. And so it should be about 10 minutes. Does that sound like an okay approach? Okay, I can keep this microphone working. So first, with respect to the federal landscape, obviously the election is on everyone's mind. It's created a great deal of uncertainty with respect to federal privacy legislation and rulemaking. And this uncertainty really highlights the importance of states like California continuing to take the lead on privacy and technology policy. So you'll remember that the agency opposed the American Privacy Rights Act of 2024. That's federal privacy legislation that sought to preempt the CCPA, the DELETE Act, and other important state privacy laws. It's not expected to move forward in its current form this year. We've also been monitoring the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, and the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, known as COPA 2.0. They passed the Senate as a single vehicle earlier this year. They advanced out of House Energy and Commerce separately earlier this year as well. Together, they'd expand privacy and online protections for children and teens. And the agency hasn't taken a formal position on any of these bills, but appreciate that the current versions of all of them explicitly allow states to adopt stronger protections. So those bills are very close to the finish line. We've heard that they're unlikely to advance this year, but we'll continue to monitor. Based on the House Speaker's comments, they appear more likely to advance next year, possibly with revisions, but we'll have to keep an eye on that and provide updates to the board. We've heard that there will be likely revived efforts in 2025 to pursue federal consumer privacy legislation that could take an even more sweeping approach to try to preempt state privacy laws with a single party trifecta. They likely have a better chance of passing it than in the current divided Congress. So staff will continue to work with California partners, California delegation in Congress, and other states to defend our ability to continue to move the ball forward on privacy. So moving to federal regulatory activity, likewise, the path ahead is unclear as well. We did want to flag that earlier this month, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, proposed a rule that would expand the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or FCRA, to cover certain data broker activity. So that could have implications for our work to implement the DELETE Act, since both the CCPA and the DELETE Act have FCRA exemption. So staff are currently analyzing the CFPB proposal and its potential impact on California law. Should the regulation move forward, the agency may want to consider exploring legislative efforts to remove the FCRA exemptions in California privacy law, but it is currently unclear what will happen to the CFPB rulemaking under the new administration. So we'll continue to monitor, engage as appropriate, and keep the board updated. At the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, they've also been working on updating the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act regulations and pursuing privacy rulemaking. But again, it's unclear what will happen to them in the new administration. So we will continue to watch. And next slide. In contrast, California is moving full speed ahead, particularly on AI regulation. This year, California introduced dozens of privacy and AI bills. By my count, 23 of them signed into law, covering varied focus areas. 4 of the bills that we were tracking were vetoed. But as you can see, there's a lot going on in California, and we'll continue to see evolving law. Next slide, please. So going through briefly, CCPA bills, the agency sponsored our first piece of legislation this year, AB 3048, which would have required browsers and pursuant to regulation mobile operating systems to include a setting allowing consumers to send opt-out preference signals. As you know, that was vetoed. I'll discuss that in more detail a little bit later on. The CCPA also supported AB 1949, sponsored by the Attorney General's Office, which sought to expand the protections provided to children under the CCPA. The agency moved to support once the bill was amended to retain the actual knowledge standard and remove the required rulemaking for the agency on age verification. So that also was vetoed. We formally supported two bills that were signed into law, AB 1008 from Assemblymember Bauer Kahan, that underscored that personal information can exist in various formats, including in certain AI systems, as well as SB 1223 from Senator Becker, and that added neural data to the CCPA's definition of sensitive personal information. The Assembly Privacy Omnibus Bill, AB 3286, was also signed into law. That made several tweaks to the CCPA, including making threshold adjustments to the CCPA for cost of living self-executing, rather than having to go through a rulemaking process every 2 years. And finally, another bill was passed to amend the CCPA, AB 1824, requiring businesses that receive personal information as part of a merger or acquisition to honor the opt-out request made prior to that merger. Next slide, please. So moving on to AI, there's a lot of legislative activity in California this year focused on AI. 18 bills signed into law out of the dozens that were introduced and considered. In general, most of them target specific harms. For example, many of them regulate AI use in certain industries with respect to certain types of content. And they're distinct bills addressing media and entertainment, elections and democracy, pornography, education, and healthcare. And wanted to particularly flag that we appreciate that AB 2885 from Assemblymember Bauer Kahan that was established a consistent definition of artificial intelligence across the California code, and one that's quite similar to the definition in our proposed regulation. Next slide, please. So moving on to 2025. So to give a brief overview of the timeline ahead of us in California, I'll spare you going through every single date and refer you to the slide, but noting that the legislature will reconvene January 6th, 2025. Next slide, please. And the last day to pass bills will be September 12th, and then the governor will have until October 12th. For veto bills, that's the timeline for most. Next slide. So moving on to the agency's primary legislative focus in California from last year, AB 3048, again, required browsers and mobile operating systems for opt-out preference signals. So in staff's view, opt-out preference signals are one of the most important things consumers can do to exercise their privacy preferences. They allow consumers a single step to opt out of the sale and sharing of personal information with every website with which they interact. Privacy-focused browsers are already offering native support for these signals, but browsers that come pre-installed on devices like Google Chrome and Apple Safari don't. Safari doesn't allow consumers to add this functionality even through third-party browser plugins, leaving many consumers out of luck. And it's more important than ever that consumers are able to exercise their privacy preferences, especially with respect to reproductive health, immigration status, religious beliefs, among other sensitive topics, and parents need easier controls to protect their kids' privacy. So the bill advanced out the legislature. It was vetoed by the governor, who highlighted concerns over the requirement that mobile operating systems offer these tools because the technology for mobile hasn't yet been developed. Given the governor's objections to the mobile requirements, and because having access to opt-out preference signals while consumers using browsers would have tremendous value, staff put forward a modified proposal for the agency to support a browser-only. So this memo is in the meeting materials. The modified proposal also emphasizes that it's important to build a broad coalition of supporters. For example, groups focused on reproductive rights, immigrant rights, employee and labor concerns, among others. It clarifies that staff would continue to work with stakeholders, including the regulated community, the legislature, and the governor's office to further refine the proposal. And finally, staff requests flexibility when it comes to sponsorship so that staff can be nimble and pursue opportunities with the greatest chance of success. And answer any questions.
Yes, Mr. Worth.
Sorry. Thank you very much. A couple questions. In reading the governor's reason for vetoing, he stated he thought this should first be addressed by the software developers. Is there any progress been made on that?
Not to my understanding. So in my understanding, in order to develop these tools, researchers would need access to systems in order to develop them, but I will defer to our technologists.
Test. Great. Sorry. And let me just thank you for that question. Let me just briefly say these. I'm guilty of it myself. These mics are inconsistent, so we should try to not move when we speak. Your mics are fine. Our mics are. We're getting complaints on the Zoom, so I'll just try to keep my head still while I respond. So that's going to be my strategy. So as Deputy Director Mahoney shared. On the mobile operating systems and even things like set-top boxes and smart TVs and these type of things, the operating systems are closed in such a way where only the manufacturers of the technology, such as, say, Apple for iPhone or Google for the Android devices, or say Samsung for smart TV, can actually implement opt-out preference signals in the mobile environment. And to our knowledge, there's been no effort to do so. Some developers have tried, but the system is closed. These are walled gardens, and there's no ability for mobile kind of mobile operating systems to have opt-out preference signals without, say, Apple or Google implementing it. The bill that we had sponsored last year had rulemaking that was intended to be collaborative with those developers, with Google and Microsoft and Apple and the developers of all the devices we use every day today. But currently, there's no way for an independent developer or a third-party developer to implement opt-out preference signals in the mobile environment without the support and participation of those larger firms.
So how do we not get to the same place, a year from now, where we sponsor a bill? We know the concerns, right, through the veto. What can we do either with that office to make progress as opposed to being back in the same position?
You mean by maintaining the mobile operating system?
I just know that it got vetoed, and for what reason? So how do we avoid that happening again? If we don't have any control over what the developers can do, what can we do?
Mr.
Well, I think the major difference that we're talking about with the proposal that's being brought to us now, if I can reflect that in my understanding of the memo, which by the way was excellent, is dropping the mobile aspects of the bill that the governor referred to. We don't know what the governor will do in that response. In other words, we're in terms of limiting the proposal basically so that it's only dealing with the technology that already exists, and we know that. Hopefully that will make the difference. I'd like to incorporate by reference as a lawyer here the incredible comments that board member McTaggart made at our last meeting that we certainly think that the major companies like Google and Apple, et cetera, will hopefully consider coming to the table again this year to try to make this work. Obviously, this would have a very profound impact on the work that we do and on protecting privacy rights. I'm very proud of what the agency attempted to do. But I think directly to your question, our hope would be, if I can reflect that both capturing a great coalition of so many folks who should be supportive of this in the legislature, as well as hopefully being able to convince the governor and other key stakeholders that by restricting this bill to no longer apply to that mobile environment, but to an environment that already can accommodate these signals, that should make a huge difference.
Oh, so
Thank you,
that,
Mr. Liebert. Mr. McTaggart has a comment, and then I will let you respond, Mr. Worth. Okay, Mr. Worth, go ahead.
no, that's really what wasn't my next question was stakeholders. Geo, are we able to have those conversations now? And are we having those conversations now?
Yeah, so we had some productive conversations last year, but things really accelerated towards the end,
Right.
and we kind of ran out of time. So, doing this again gives us more opportunity to meaningfully engage with a wide variety of stakeholders. And then dropping the mobile operating system requirement can allow us to focus on browsers where there's already existing technology in use for these signals.
Thank you, Mr. Worth. Mr. McTaggart?
Thank you. So since the last meeting, I've had conversations with folks in the assembly and also with folks in the business, so to speak, of people who might be opposed or who were opposed to this. And let me just say, I think that the bill really was a good bill, and the objections that I've heard, which are kind of sometimes they just always kind of make me recoil in disbelief, are, well, this will be too confusing for consumers because, if they have control over their information, then they're going to get confused when there's an opt-out and they go to a third-party website and their website doesn't work. And when you say to these businesses, well, then the consumer can just turn off the opt-out, you kind of get, well, that's still going to be confusing, then they're going to sue us. My sense is that we all kind of just assumed once it went out to the assembly that the heavy lifting was done. And we thought, oh, great, fabulous, we've done this. And we, and by I mean we, I mean the agency, I mean the privacy community, I mean the advocates out there, I mean the businesses that are truly pro-privacy, didn't mobilize to say to the governor, hey, look, this is really an important thing. And you can only imagine the governor trying to go through however many hundred bills, it's a difficult job. So, given that mobile is the deal, like giving up on mobile is sort of giving up on, it's way over half the searches, it's where the world is right now. What I'd like to suggest is if there's a way we can kind of talk to some of these folks and to Assemblymember Lowenthal, who I think is willing to reintroduce this bill. The areas that I think would be helpful to business, so let's take them at their word that they're worried about being sued if they deliver the opt-out to the third party and the third party doesn't act on it. So we could have, if you look at the bill, there's not, black letter law about saying, hey, you have no liability for transmitting the signal if the third party doesn't do anything. And I think we could really buttress it would, because we don't, we're not asking the transmitter to have any liabilities. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then I think, just to Mr. Lieber's point right there, potentially a lead-in. So we could have a longer phase-in to the extent that maybe you have a shorter phase-in for the non-mobile and then a longer phase-in for the mobile. But I think there's a way to massage this potentially and then, to these, my crystal ball isn't any better than anybody else's, but if it did get passed, I think then having a full court press, in literally the press and everywhere else saying, hey, look, this is a great thing for consumers. Let's do this. My sense is there was some obfuscation in October and September. So I would be my, as opposed to giving up right now on the mobile, I would love to see if we could incorporate it and get the whole thing this year and try to make it address the stated concerns of industry.
Thank you, Mr. McTaggart. So the last bit, I was going to ask you to clarify, but so if I'm understanding you correctly, that rather than just doing a bill for the browser this time and then picking up mobile later, we would, your proposal would be that we would include mobile, but we might put a longer lead time in.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, obviously, I'm not the author, and so there'd have to be some,
Sure,
but something like that, something like that to work with it, to address the stated concerns. And again, we're in it for the long game, not the short game.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, if the browsers that were a year and then their mobile was 2 years or something like that, I don't think it would. No, we just want to get on the board here, and I feel like if we can reintroduce this, I think the legislature passed it last year. Hopefully, a new legislature this year, but hopefully they will again. And then hopefully we can get a hold of the governor's office and really kind of educate them as to the benefits for the consumers.
Thank you, Mr. McTaggart. And I really like the limitation of liability idea because that was a stated objection. Mr. Liebert, then Mr. Lay, and Mr. Sultani. Okay. And Mr. Worth, do you want to pick up again as well?
Not on this topic.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent idea. We'll have to see what the author feels like. It's always difficult, as everyone knows, to come back the following year after you've had a veto. So clearly, many negotiations would remain. But my own personal perspective on this is one of the most important things that the state of California can do to protect consumer privacy. This goes back to the original bargain that many of us regret, that we're not an opt-in society, we're an opt-out. And if you look at the opt-out rates still about many of these platforms, they're still really low. Consumers have a long way to go to be educated on this. But if we can accomplish this here in California, we will create opportunities that are really unprecedented for us to protect our personal information as consumers. So I don't think we should give up on this. I think you've been a great leader on this, Mr. McTaggart. And the real question is how the author and all of us will ultimately conclude, as a matter of strategy, whether to start the bill broadly, knowing that we've got a veto that occurred based upon mobile, and that the opponents of the bill know that there was a veto based upon mobile, or whether we start with the hope that we can keep it in through negotiations and figuring out all this stuff. But my bottom line is that it's such an important effort on the part of the agency with such profound potential help in the future for consumers that we should spearhead along and do this.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. Mr. Lay?
Yeah, I'm in agreement that I would want to start strong, right? And maybe the way to address the veto message is by, working on the edges, addressing industry concerns, stated concerns, and seeing if those are real, or just put out there to derail consumer privacy. But I think we get more folks signed on in supporting of the bill, making a bigger statement to the governor that this is important if we start strong and make the attempt, as Mr. McTaggart noted, to address liability and other concerns that we're not trying to push onto businesses that are developing these opt-out preference signals requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Lay. Mr. Sultani?
Thank you all for those comments. And so, indeed, Ms. Mahoney and I did have, these discussions regarding the mobile piece. And I agree with Mr. Liebert that this is probably one of the most important things that we can, the opt-out preference signals are one of the most important innovations, not just for Californians, but the dozens of other states that also have these requirements. And so it was a really challenging kind of discussion about whether to include that piece. And then indeed it had a ratcheting where the requirement for mobile was actually set after a rulemaking in consultation with the companies after some time. So we did have that kind of path. Temporarily switching my hat to technologist hat, the challenge here is that the importance of the opt-out preference signal for browsers is incredibly also significant. So while a lot of folks go to mobile, we're already also seeing a backsliding with overall net consumer privacy on the browser side. So just today, the UK ICO, which is one of our sister agencies that we work closely with, issued kind of a statement in The Guardian calling out Google as a browser maker because they have now moved silently to enable browser fingerprinting and permit browser fingerprinting for the purpose of advertising. They changed their policies to allow that. And while we're in the weeds here, I know not everyone knows what that is. What it signifies is that the browser controls the privacy protections built into browsers, for example, for blocking cookies that do provide some protections in addition to opt-out. Those are no longer relevant because Google is saying we're allowing advertisers explicitly to track people even without cookies. And so for so the only defense that consumers have in those environments in the web browser is an opt-out preference. So, or an opt-out generally. And so for those reasons, it's a really tough battle. And I don't have an opinion on whether to include it as a board deliberation, but the significance of opt-outs for the browser are really, it's dire, and it's also important for mobile. So it's a very hard choice.
Thank you, Mr. Soltani. Mr. McTaggart?
I totally agree with Mr. Lay. I think if we start strong, we will get more support from the community as opposed to kind of settling for half loaf early on. So I really think this is a question also for us of just mobilizing that privacy community, state and nationally. I think we can do that with a stronger bill.
I do not disagree. I do disagree I do agree with you as a political matter. I would like to leave some flexibility for staff to work with sponsors, though, to see if there are considerations that we are not available to us right here in this discussion. Any other comments or questions on this? Can I check in with you, Mr. Worth?
New topic. It can actually apply to agenda item 5 anyway.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Ms. Mahoney, what else do you need from us? I can request a motion to direct staff to move forward with this, and I will formulate it the way that I like and then see what the board thinks. But is that what you need from us?
Yes, I appreciate the board's direction. This has been a really fruitful discussion, and providing some flexibility does allow discussions with potential authors, stakeholders, to make adjustments down the line.
All right. So before I formulate a motion, I just want to check with Mr. Lay and Mr. McTaggart if that is acceptable, or you want us to direct staff to definitely start with the whole, with both sets of opt-outs.
Well, I'll defer to you as chair. I'm not even sure we needed a motion. I think
we do.
Okay, if we need a motion, then I would prefer that it covers both opt-out for mobile and for desktop, for browser.
And if we, if we need to move to the browser to get a sponsor, then what is your view?
I spoke with Assemblymember Lowenthal like a week ago. I don't think we'll need that.
All right, Mr. Lay.
Yeah, I think expressing a preference in the motion for the more expansive bill, but giving Maureen the ability to make negotiations as appropriate to make sure we get the support for the bill.
All right. So the motion I will request is, may I have a motion to direct staff to pursue the legislative proposal to require browser and, at least to begin, mobile vendors to include a feature that allows users to exercise their California privacy rights through an opt-out preference signal with the California legislature in the upcoming session, and to allow staff flexibility to support the proposal up through a sponsorship capacity based on staff's assessment of the level of support and the features that will give the proposal the greatest chance of passage and the greatest effect. That work? Okay. May I have that motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I have a motion and a second. Is there public comment on this agenda item?
For this agenda item number 4, if you'd like to make a comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 4. I believe we have a few hands raised at this time.
Wonderful.
First, we have Shannon Straw. I am going to unmute you at this time. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comment, so please begin as soon as you are ready. I'm sorry, Matt Schwartz, go ahead and you are unmuted, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, good morning. My name is Matt Schwartz. I'm a policy analyst at Consumer Reports. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and for all of the agency's work to make opt-outs more usable and accessible for consumers. Consumer Reports supports the agency's proposal to support legislation requiring browsers to include a setting that allows users to universally opt out of sales and sharing. This is a critical requirement to make it easier for California consumers to meaningfully take advantage of their privacy rights. While California consumers already enjoy the right to send legally binding opt-out signals, major browsers like Chrome, Safari, and Edge have suppressed usage of this right by denying native opt-out preference functionality. As a result, millions of Californians might not even be aware that they have a practical way to manage their privacy choices under the CCPA. We know that this is a reasonable and technically achievable requirement to ask of browser companies because several of them, including Brave and Firefox, already provide universal opt-out functionality. We also know that without a mandate, the giant browser companies that profit immensely from surveilling and profiling consumers will not implement these much-needed tools. Unsurprisingly, these companies fought tooth and nail to prevent AB 3048 from being signed into law. CR was a strong supporter of AB 3048 this past legislative session, and we were extremely disappointed to see the governor veto the bill, even after it received overwhelming support in the legislature. But as you've already heard, the governor's statement accompanying his veto focused primarily on the impact the legislation would have had on mobile operating systems, leaving open the possibility that the bill more narrowly tailored to browsers could be successful. While we remain convinced that consumers deserve an accessible way to use their opt-out rights on mobile devices as well, we're happy to support the agency's proposal in whatever form that might arrive. The idea behind universal opt-outs is that it shouldn't be hard for consumers to say no to their personal data being sold or shared. We think that's a goal well worth fighting for and worthy of the agency's time and attention this next session. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we're happy to provide support for this initiative in any way that we can.
Thank you for your comments. Tracy Rosenberg, I'm going to mute you at this time. You will have 3 minutes to make your comment. Go ahead and speak when you're ready.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Tracy Rosenberg. I'm with Oakland Privacy. We are a statewide coalition that focuses on regulation and guardrails in the interests of privacy protections, civil rights, and community consent. We wanted to express our support for the agency reintroducing AB 3048, hopefully in its current or strongest version, and getting the strongest level of protections for consumers that you can get. The operators of the world's largest internet browsers, most notably Alphabet, which runs Chrome, and Microsoft, which operates Edge, have declined to adopt and opt out, a global opt-out preference signal to allow users of their browser to indicate that they don't want their personal information sold or shared by any website that they visit. Smaller browsers like Firefox, Brave, and Opera have or are in the process of implementing a browser preference signal, but they are used by much smaller segments of the general internet user base. A right that is difficult to exercise becomes a conditional right, one that is only available if you are determined enough, persistent enough, and computer savvy enough to be able to use it. But the intention of the California Privacy Rights Act and what this board is kind of here to do was not a conditional right to control the sale and sharing of your personal information. It was intended and sold to voters as an absolute right. I'll take a second to quote from the website of the proponents of Prop 24, who are, of course, on the board now. With the historic passage of Prop 24, the California Privacy Rights Act, we are at the beginning of a journey that will profoundly shape the fabric of our society by redefining who is in control of our most personal information and putting consumers back in charge of their own data. Putting consumers back in charge of their own data requires that internet businesses let users make decisions for themselves in an efficient manner without having to negotiate confusing mazes on an ongoing basis. Again, we have to let people exercise the rights that we are trying to give them in a way that is realistic, useful, and efficient for them. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your comment. Haley, I'm going to unmute you at this time. You will have 3 minutes to make your comment. Begin when you are ready.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Haley Tsukayama, and I'm Associate Director of Legislative Activism at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a digital rights nonprofit. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. On behalf of EFF and our allies at Access Humboldt, I'm here to speak in strong support of the bill concept being discussed today. We were proud supporters of AB 3048 last year, which was common sense legislation that would have helped consumers exercise their privacy rights and use the protections granted to them by the California Consumer Privacy Act. As you all know, large companies have often made it difficult for consumers to exercise those rights on their own. EFF, which employs both technologists and lawyers, agreed that the proposal last year properly balanced providing consumers with ways to exercise their privacy rights without creating burdensome requirements for developers or risk hindering innovation. We think the changes to this bill proposed by the memo are a sensible response to the governor's very disappointing veto last year. But obviously, we would support a broader proposal and would love to continue conversations as the bill evolves, including those discussed today. As consumer advocates, we believe this proposal, as described, moves California in the right direction to empower consumers to have control over their own privacy choices. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. This is for agenda item number 4. If we have any other members of the public who'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *6 if you're joining us by phone. Again, this is for agenda item number 4. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Marzian, and thank you to the commentators. The board will now vote whether to adopt the motion as stated. Ms. Marzian, would you please perform the roll call vote?
Yes. Board Member Lay?
Aye.
Board Member Liebert?
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart?
Aye.
Board Member Worth?
Aye.
Chair Urban?
Aye.
We have 5 yeses.
Thank you, Ms. Marzian. The motion carries with a vote of 5-0. Thank you very much to Ms. Mahoney and to the board for a robust discussion, and again to our public commentators. I'm going to suggest that we take a quick break. Shall we say that we come back at 11:15 maybe? 11's good? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break. We'll be back soon. Thank you for writing to the info@cppa.ca.gov address to let us know that the mics on the other side of the podium are still fairly inconsistent. We really apologize for that. And we're going to do our best to swallow the microphone or whatever we can do to make sure that the audio doesn't drop out. And with that, we will move to agenda item number 5, which is our annual intergovernmental affairs update and priorities, which we added to our regularized agenda last year. This will also be presented by CPPA's Deputy Director of Policy and Legislation, Maureen Mahoney. I just want to sort of editorialize for a second that these materials are impressive and exciting, and I am looking forward to hearing the update. Ms. Mahoney, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, please provide an update on intergovernmental affairs. So as you know, the statute CCPA directs our agency to work with privacy authorities in California and other jurisdictions to Great. Oh boy, is that right? So the statute directs us to work with authorities in California and other jurisdictions towards consistency. That's guided our engagement and outreach. And California is in a strong position to continue to lead on privacy since our state is so active, not only in innovating new technologies, but also innovating on regulations to incentivize positive outcomes for all Californians. Next slide, please. And today we're proud to share the progress that the agency has made in developing partnerships across the globe. So we'll first describe the work in California, then with other states, on the federal level, internationally, and then we'll look to 2025. And this should be around 10 minutes as well. And I want to emphasize that this work brings together all of our teams, the executive team, enforcement, legal, public affairs, admin, in developing and maintaining these partnerships. Next. Back one, please. Great. So to start off with California, we're very proud of the partnerships we've developed here, and we're highlighting 3 of them. The first, the California Attorney General's Office, they're a natural partner because we share enforcement of the CCPA and a commitment to protecting Californians' consumer privacy. We're in frequent communication and work closely on enforcement and policy matters, including working together to push back against federal preemption efforts. Likewise, the California Civil Rights Department, they're another natural partner in that they, like us, are working on a rulemaking having to do with automated decision systems. So we're watching that proceeding closely, and we appreciate their commitment to consistency. And we're truly grateful for our partner, the California Department of Technology, for their dedication and generosity in working with us to develop the DROP system under the DELETE Act. With respect to multi-state privacy laws, we've continued to engage with other states to encourage consistency in privacy protections as more states continue to consider privacy laws. Now, approximately 20 states have comprehensive privacy laws, 12 of which, including California, require businesses to honor browser privacy signals as an opt-out of sale. And we expect this activity to continue this fall and next year. And we'll likely see more comprehensive privacy bills, more bills modeled after the DELETE Act, and we'll share what we've learned there to help other states. I expect that next year we'll see continued legislative interest in the states on AI and automated decision-making technology. To that end, staff has continued to participate in a bipartisan multi-state working group that meets on a roughly bi-weekly basis, bringing together legislators, policymakers from across the United States to share learnings from a variety of stakeholders and discuss how to better achieve consistency across states. We also work with federal partners, including the Federal Communications Commission. In late October, the enforcement team announced new memorandum of understanding with the FCC, creating a partnership that enables us to share learnings and expertise and coordinate in investigations. Next slide. And internationally, we're really proud that the agency announced a declaration of cooperation with the French Data Protection Authority, known as the CNIL. And this declaration establishes a general framework of cooperation to facilitate joint internal research and education, share best practices, and convene periodic meetings. And we look forward to continuing to benefit from their expertise and experience as they were established nearly 50 years ago in 1978. Some of our other highlights for international engagement include cooperating with the Global Privacy Enforcement Network, or GPEN. They facilitate coordination on privacy enforcement initiatives, and the agency's enforcement team participated in a global privacy sweep of over 1,000 websites and apps to search for deceptive design patterns. Although the GPEN sweep applied a broader definition of deceptive design than the one provided in our law, our enforcement team contributed to this global effort. Next were members of what's known as the Berlin Group. Actually, can we go back one, please? Next were members of the Berlin Group. They bring together primarily data protection authorities from across the globe and has a focus on privacy-enhancing technology. Executive Director Soltani presented on opt-out preference signals before the group in Oslo in June. They're interested in pursuing a working paper on these signals that highlights increasing adoption of these signals. And I presented a first draft of that paper at their fall meeting in Brussels, and will continue to engage with an eye towards finalizing the paper next year, with the goal of encouraging further adoption of these signals. We've been a member of the Global Privacy Assembly, which brings together over 100 data protection authorities from across the globe. For about 3 years now, the agency attended the Global Privacy Assembly in Bermuda last year and Turkey before that. We're also members of the Asia Pacific Privacy Authorities, a similar organization focused on data protection authorities in the Pacific Rim. Executive Director Soltani represented the agency in Tokyo in late November, engaged in multiple days of public and private discussion, many bilateral meetings with our counterparts in Asia and elsewhere. And I represented the agency at APPA's virtual meeting this spring. Just to expand a bit more on these bilaterals, both at these international convenings and in other settings, we've spoken several times to the European Commission to follow up on the board's interest in exploring the adequacy conversation. So the federal election has created uncertainty with respect to the existing US-EU data transfer agreement, since the basis for that agreement was created by executive order under the Biden administration, and it could be undone, highlighting how an agreement with respect to California adequacy could have particular value. As Executive Director Soltani mentioned at the July meeting, the European Commission will be happy to present at a board meeting next year, outlining the steps that in their view would be necessary in order to achieve adequacy, the primary one being establishing some way for California privacy rights to apply to Europeans, not just California consumers. And I also wanted to highlight, the number of productive conversations and bilaterals we've had this year that brought together staff from across the divisions, including the British Data Protection Authority, the central EU authorities, such as the European Data Protection Supervisor and the European Data Protection Board, Korean DPA, the Dutch, New Sri Lanka DPA, among others. Next slide. And then looking ahead to 2025, there will be further opportunities to engage. The Berlin Group meetings will be in Georgia and Uruguay. So there'll be opportunities for staff to continue to work on the opt-out preference signal paper. We're monitoring resources and the political situation in Georgia vis-a-vis in-person participation. They already have the dates lined up for GPA. That'll be in Korea next September. And we expect that the Asia Pacific Privacy Authorities, they'll have a virtual meeting in the spring, and they haven't decided where their fall in-person meeting will be. So as a reminder, similar to the process for domestic conferences, staff supports board members attending meetings of international bodies. We just request that board members notify staff if there's a meeting they want to attend, and we'll coordinate with chairperson, manage logistics, and ensure that we're complying with existing law, including that no more than 2 board members are planning to go. So hopefully this will ensure a streamlined process. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Well, that was as impressive as I expected it to be. Congratulations to you and Mr. Soltani and everybody who supported all of these interactions. I'm delighted to hear that California has hopefully been a resource in multiple fora, nationally and internationally, and also, of course, that we are taking advantage of the resources that are available to us through other authorities. So kudos to these efforts. Comments, questions from board members? Yes, Mr. Lay.
I just wanted to add to that, for those listening, I think this work is really important to the harmonization piece that, we hear from businesses all the time, like we don't want to have a lot of different regulations. And, this is the type of work that's so important for that internationally and domestically. So yeah, great work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lay. I'm going to one more time tout my favorite part of the CCPA and thank Mr. McTaggart, Mr. Sultani, and everybody who put it in there that empowered and gave us the duty to coordinate and to harmonize with other jurisdictions, because I think it's incredibly valuable for policy around the world. And thank you again, Ms. Mahoney, for all the work and for the presentation. Are there any public comments on this item? I'd like to invite those at this time.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 5. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Marzian. Thank you for both of those presentations, Ms. Mahoney. And with that, we will move to agenda item number 6. If you're ready, Ms. White. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is a discussion of the 2025 board meeting calendar. And that will be with our Deputy Director of Public and External Affairs, Ms. Megan White. There's a presentation and a draft calendar in your materials to support the discussion. Whenever you're ready, Ms. White, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. We're just waiting for the slide deck to come up, and everybody can hear me well. I will do my best to speak directly into the mic. Wonderful. Thank you all for the opportunity to present the 2025 board meeting calendar. Of course, this is just a proposal for your consideration. We have some modifications that we are suggesting for 2025, and we believe these modifications will benefit the board, the public, and staff. Next slide, please. So first, I wanted to give you an overview of the cadence. One of the major recommendations that we're making for 2025, as opposed to 2024, is that we suggest we move to quarterly meetings. These meetings would be held the first Friday of the month. And we would propose that this starts in February of 2025 because we are meeting December 19th, so we feel as though a January meeting might not be appropriate. Another suggestion we are making is that the board has the opportunity to do 2-day meetings as they feel appropriate. In this case, you would have the board meeting on the first Friday of the month, and you would have the opportunity to add a Thursday meeting as well if you feel that all the board's business could not be handled in one day. Important point here, the Thursday meetings, we recommend that those meetings be informational items. So they might not be items that you would vote on, but it would give the board the opportunity to do some informational sessions that I know have been of interest for quite some time. And of course, as you all know, they could be half-day meetings, so you don't necessarily have to full 8 hours on Thursday. You could do a half-day session in the morning or the afternoon. So we would recommend that Fridays are the standardized meetings and that on Thursdays, totally optional for you all, whether you'd like to do it or not. So what does this mean if we move to quarterly meetings? Would there be less board meetings? Well, let's take a look back really quick. When you look at 2024, we met 6 times, apologies. And that
just felt like 16.
It's always a pleasure to see you all here. I wish we could do more. But we felt that was somewhat of an every other month cadence. And so by adding the Thursday option, even though we would be moving to quarterly meetings, you would certainly have the opportunity to meet even more times in 2025 if you preferred. The reason why staff is recommending this new option is because we feel that it adds flexibility for the board. It's going to give you the opportunity to decide whether you need 1 or 2-day meetings. But we would really appreciate the opportunity to have a set schedule going into 2025, because as you know, that what you guys decide to do certainly helps guide staff work.
In addition, we are also suggesting that in 2025, we start to alternate locations between Sacramento and San Francisco. Again, we feel this would be a benefit for the board, the public, and staff. So as you all know, throughout the history of the agency, we've generally been meeting in the Bay Area. But as we're doing today, adding the Sacramento component helps people who are located here in Sacramento, gives them the opportunity to attend in person. As you know, we don't have a lot of people that generally attend our board meetings in person, but it does make it accessible for people who live in the Central Valley Sacramento region. And of course, we will continue to stream these meetings from everywhere, to anyone. So there's definitely no need to attend in person, but it does give that flexibility. Adding Sacramento into the mix also helps to reduce some cost. When we have a meeting here in Sacramento, we don't pay a facility fee. In addition, most of the staff that work on your board meetings and present are located here in the Sacramento region. So by moving it to Sacramento, it reduces cost to the agency in terms of travel reimbursement and hotel stays. So in addition, this is the bullet point 3 is the last big suggestion for a change in 2025. And we are recommending that board members hold 1 day a month on non-meeting months to convene on an as-needed basis. So I know you all are very busy, but we do feel like there's a lot of benefit here. For example, when you have time-sensitive situations that you need to take care of quickly, by you all holding that 1 day, we'll be able to convene a lot more easily. It minimizes logistics. Well, what would be a situation like this? Perhaps enforcement has a time-sensitive settlement or action that the board needs to take. It's going to make it much easier for you all to meet because you'll have held that day already. And of course, as you know, you do have the option to attend virtually as long as we have a quorum. Next slide, please. Okay, so this gives a little bit visual representation of what we're really talking about. Slide 3 has a nice snapshot of the year. As you see, the shaded months are the months that we recommend meeting. So if you do approve this proposal, you would be meeting the first Fridays of the shaded months. That looks like February 7th, which we would recommend hosting in San Francisco because we're here today in December. Then you would have May 2nd in Sacramento, August 8th in San Francisco, and November 7th in Sacramento. That rounds out the year. The extra optional Thursdays would all be the Thursday preceding the board meeting. For quick reference, that looks like February 6th, May 1st, August 7th, November 6th. And then for the additional holds, that would be the first Friday of non-meeting months with just 2 exceptions. So here we're looking at the non-shaded months, and January 17th would certainly be an option for you all if you did feel that you had board meeting materials or board meeting items that needed to be covered in January. If not, we would have our standing board meeting in February, and then you all would just hold for the option of having a meeting March 7th, April 4th, June 6th. For the month of July, the first Friday of the month is July 4th, so we would move that one to July 11th, September 5th, October 3rd, and December 5th. Next slide, please. Okay, so as has been past practice, staff has met and determined some standing board items that we think would be helpful to discuss throughout the year. Of course, as you all know, these would just be the standing items, and you all will be adding to these items. So I'm just going to roll through the proposed standing items. Next slide, please. So looking at Friday, February 7th, we'd recommend having 2 items from our administrative team. The first one is the Executive Director Annual Review. As we all know, Mr. Sultani's last day is going to be before this meeting probably. So you would have the option to discuss any hiring that you'd like to do or anything along those lines, or you could simply omit that item if it's not appropriate. And then you'd also do the annual administrative update, and our legal team would present regulation proposals and priorities. All right, moving on to the next slide, slide 6. We're looking at May 2025, which would be held on Friday, May 2nd. This would include numerous divisions presenting to you. Our legislation team would have what the board wants to take positions on in terms of pending legislation. The enforcement team would provide their annual enforcement report and priorities, and the public affairs team would provide our annual public affairs update. Moving on to August. August 8th. Here you would have our admin team presenting 2 standing items for you, the budget plan for the upcoming budget development, and admin would also provide the annual hiring update, including diversity and inclusion metrics. And then rounding out the year in November, Friday, November 7th, legislation would present 2 items very similar to today already, the annual legislation proposal and priority and annual intergovernments affair update and priorities. And that rounds out the year. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. White. I really appreciate this. I think I know that since, well, Mr. Lay can back me up or disagree with me, but I think we've been waiting and hoping for quarterly meetings for so long. And of course, you know, there's always something that comes up, but you know, that is an outcome devoutly to be wished from my perspective. I also value the thought of having meetings in Sacramento for staff and also for geographic diversity and accessibility. I would request that those not be alternating because during this semester, I'm simply unable. This is not something I'm keen to talk about in public, but I'm also committed to not hiding accessibility issues. And the travel for me is extremely physically difficult and requires multiple days of recovery time. So during the semester, I cannot do it, but I can do it in May and I can do it in August. So that would be a request for me. The other thing that I would like us to consider would be, and this is a question and maybe it would take a while to coordinate, but geographic diversity beyond just Sacramento and the Bay Area. So, you know, we do have staff in Los Angeles as well. And of course, people live throughout our beautiful and great state. So I'm just mentioning that for that purpose. Similarly, you know, Thursdays, I teach from Monday to Thursday. I'm going to try very hard to stop on Thursday morning. I appreciate the idea of having informational sessions during that time. So comments or questions from board members? Mr. Worth, did I see your?
Yeah, you might have answered some of them. I was just curious, where do the Fridays come from? And maybe it has to do with scheduling for some of the board members?
Yeah,
Okay.
those of us who have other jobs. Yeah.
Well, I think we all do.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
No,
when we started, that was the thing, and,
Right,
and then
right.
for me in particular, the academic calendar is always set up like that, so that you can have conferences and things
Okay,
on Fridays.
that's fine. And then you're referring to Sacramento being difficult during the school year.
Yeah, it's okay as long as I don't have to teach right around it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of these things when you start talking about how it saves people time, it saves the agency money. I started thinking, well, why aren't we just here all the time? But now I have some good reasons. I do feel like what you said earlier, Chair, is right. If we're going to try to be accessible, maybe you have to do a meeting in Orange County, you know, where people from LA and San Diego get to us easier. It's either like just be here or move around. And neither one of them sound like they're great options for all of us, but I think it's one of those decisions. I don't know why we would just do San Francisco and Sacramento and tell Southern California that, you know, we're not thinking about that.
Ms. White, would the staff be able to sort of cost that out to and give us, you know, whether we're asking for something that's really just the sun or not? Because I agree with Mr. Worth. I just think making ourselves available to as much of the state as we can is an important goal.
Yes, we're happy to look into that. And as you know, we had the stakeholder sessions earlier this year throughout
Yeah.
the state. So we already have contacts down in the LA and Fresno areas. So I can certainly look into costing for that. In addition, it would be staff travel. So I can get that information for you. Sorry, Mr. Laird, did you have a point? Oh,
Thank you, Ms.
Mr. Laird and I worked on this item together. So I want to make sure he's included if he had anything to add.
Thank you, Ms. White. Mr. Liebert and then Mr. McTaggart. Oh, Mr. McTaggart and then Mr. Liebert.
Yeah, I think having a calendar like this sounds great. I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, I totally agree with Mr. Worth. Like, you know, more than half the state's down south. We can't just sort of, I think, abandon that. So I think we should, even if it's costly, we should plan for one meeting a year down there, just kind of for not just check the box because it's the right thing to do. I'm a little concerned about this calendar because it just kind of dropped on our desk, and a lot of us have dates that are booked. Like I see a nodding head here. I can't do the 7th and the 8th of February. And so I'm wondering if we could do the next week or a week before or something like that. I'm trying to move it right now. And then I can't do if we do need it June 6th. So I just wonder if we could have a little flexibility around that. And then the further out we can schedule them. If we adopt this, then it's fine. We know what it is for next year, and my calendar's not that busy. So 2026 is, but 25, 6 weeks out is kind of hard for me right now.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. For what it's worth, I have a conflict on the 7th too, but Mr. Liebert.
Yes, thank you for pulling this together. I support everything my fellow board members have said. I do think we should have one of the 4 meetings should be in Southern California. I recommend that 2 of our meetings be in Sacramento because I think a lot of us recognize the importance of interfacing with a lot of the stakeholders that we have here. So I would continue to suggest if we can make that work for other people's calendars, et cetera, and needs, that still makes a lot of sense. And then one, of course, in the Bay Area would be my recommendation. I think it'll be a great move for the agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. Mr. Worth, and then Mr.
I just had a question. The meeting on January 14th, the public comment period, where is that being held?
Yes, that's in Sacramento, actually in this room.
Okay. I know that we're not required to be here. Are we prohibited from attending that meeting?
So board members can certainly, I think, attend in a listening capacity. It'll also be streamed live, so anybody watching it, it will be part of the formal record. That said, I would probably discourage a majority of members attending together just because to comply with Bagley-Keene, you really couldn't talk about any of the substance being discussed that day unless we notice it as a public meeting. But otherwise, absolutely, anybody can kind of watch that session unfold live.
And those of us who might want to attend in person maybe could let you know, and then I'm happy to do some traffic control, and I'll watch remotely just to make sure we don't have more than 2 people.
Yeah, that would be great. And the other thing just to mention, for at least 2025 only, this is a provision in Bagley-Keene that sunsets technically by 2026, but it's possible the legislature would extend this to the extent it's working for the state. We do have the ability for a minority of members to participate remotely if there are maybe location conflicts, but not necessarily timing conflicts with any of these dates. And so we could have up to 2 members participating remotely.
Mr. Lay?
Yeah, I second what the chair said about wanting quarterly meetings. So yeah, I think the proposal makes sense. The times work for me right now. And yeah, I do want to recognize, Mr. Liebert's point around like Sacramento during the legislative session might be valuable, right? Just so we can get folks come in and perhaps speak to the board in Sacramento. But, knowing how that works with schedule, I just want to point that out as like a kind of important consideration if, 3048 or other legislation is appearing before the board.
Yeah, and we have our legislation discussion would be on early May, right? In the first week of May, which would be, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's just these weeks between, yeah. Mr. Liebert?
Yeah, so if you're ready, I would make a motion, although you're very good at articulating, but essentially what the staff's recommending, where we have 2 of the meetings in Sacramento, 1 in Southern California, 1 in the Bay Area. Mike. Sorry about that.
It took me a minute to understand.
Yeah, I'm
signs.
Usually I'm being told I'm too loud. This is a very strange experience. And consistent with the calendar, but also recognizing that some members may need to interface with staff, so there needs to be some flexibility on those dates that have been suggested, whatever that process would be, but essentially to adopt what staff is recommending.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. I just wasn't sure the conversation was over. So other questions or comments from anybody? Okay, Yeah, Mr. McTaggart.
Just given Bagley Keene, should we try to sort out a date right now? Because I'm not sure. It's kind of hard to sort out a date if we're not all.
It's definitely easiest if we're all here. So indeed. So the issue, let's begin. So the issue is is February 7th. I have a triple conflict. I was going to clear it all for the board meeting. But I understand others do have conflicts too. So other options, Ms. White, do you know yet what other options around that time might be? Other weeks? So like the 31st, or I'm assuming not everybody wants to do the 14th.
Did you mean the 21st? We said 31st?
I meant of January. I just went back. I meant back a week and forward a week. Yeah. And the 21st and the 28th. Oh, I cannot do the 20th. That's one conflict I can't adjust. Do we have a preference, Mr. Worth, Mr. Lay?
I'm sorry, which ones can you not do? 28 or 21? 28, okay. I agree with you on the 14th not being the greatest idea. Is
the long-suffering partners.
Is it? Is 21 available?
21?
February?
Going once? No.
How about 31st January?
31st of January.
If I
Also,
could
Ms.
propose-
White, you've got to get in here before I auction these off.
Well, if I could propose one thing, and to Board Member McTaggart's point, we did just, present you this information a week ago, and I know many people's first quarter of 2025 is quite set. So one option you would have is March 7th. You could meet that date. That was one of our potential hold dates in lieu of a February meeting, since it is towards the beginning of March.
Got it. Okay. All right. Sorry, Mr. McTaggart. What were you saying?
March 7th is way better for me. Then I don't have to cancel. I'm free that day.
Okay, March 7th. I feel like I should start talking really fast. I'm like, do I get a March 7th? What's March 7th? Okay, Mr. Worth is nodding. Sold, March 7th.
Lovely. Thank you all.
Saved how many email chains?
Really did save a
Do we need to
lot
go
of
through other
emails.
dates on the calendar? July 11th, I want to check because I know, that's a if needed one, right?
Correct.
That's okay.
June 6th, I wouldn't.
It was
be able to
June
make.
6th. I apologize.
June 6th, I wouldn't be able to make.
Okay,
Understood.
fine.
And that's an optional one. June 6th is an optional.
See, I'm still in that blush of a moment where the semester's over and I'm like, it's so open. I can do anything in June.
Exactly.
It's this, it's a misleading feeling, but it's there.
If it would be helpful, we can add the slide back up that shows the shaded months versus unshaded, just for clarity, if people want to see.
Yeah. So for that one, I could save the 13th instead. In June. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a whole day.
Yeah.
But we can certainly look into the 13th. Because we don't have this facility as our own, I just have to check with the facility.
Sure. Yes.
And we have already confirmed that CPUC can accommodate us for all of the holds. And then that's where we meet the potential meetings. That's where we meet in San Francisco. And here can accommodate us as well. So just as we look into alternative dates, that's when I have to go back and check.
All right. Were there any other first Fridays that were posing a difficulty for folks? Okay, in that case, may I have a motion to accept staff's proposal regarding the regularized calendar for 2025, including dates as discussed by the board in our meeting today and topics as presented to us, and an understanding of locations that will be in San Francisco and Sacramento, and if possible, also in Southern California.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Liebert. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Liebert and a second from Mr. Lay. I'd like to invite public comment on this item.
This is for agenda item number 6. If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature or by pressing star 9 if you're joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 6. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marzion. Yes, Mr. Laird.
Is it on? All right. Just as a point of clarification, and I think Mr. McTaggart raised this point, if the board is supportive of this cadence sort of ongoing, I just wanted to clarify that point now that if everybody is supportive, then perhaps maybe we can also just assume that in 2026, for instance, we'll stay on the same cadence.
Okay.
First Friday of February, May, August, and November.
Okay. I made that motion up on the spot. Would you like me to amend it, or can
I don't think we need to amend the motion. I think the motion for 2025 is perfect, but I just wanted to make that point of clarification now, so we're not here a year from now thinking, oh, we didn't schedule for February of 2026.
Wonderful.
I totally intended that in my motion.
Should have let Mr. Liebert draft it out of thin air.
Could I just ask them to staff to circulate those dates, because inevitably
Yes,
I'll get the
please.
first Friday wrong or the quarter or whatever else. So if you could just
Yeah.
get that out for 26. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
maybe mid-year even, just to
Yep.
the jump.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely
Thank you.
happy to do that.
All right. All right, Ms. Marzian, would you please call the roll call vote?
Yes. Board Member Lay,
Aye.
Board Member Liebert,
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart,
Aye.
Board Member Worth,
Aye.
Chair Urban.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeses.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. White. And everybody, I know that we are very difficult to schedule, and it only becomes more challenging with the happy news that the agency grows in complexity and in the work that we're doing. So it's greatly appreciated, all the work on the calendar and the schedule. And I want to also thank all my fellow board members for their flexibility and their input and their willingness and desire to be accessible across the state. So thank you, everyone. And we will hopefully have given you what you need and what we need for a while now.
Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Excellent. I'm just looking to see where we should be on the agenda. I'm going to suggest actually that we take the next item out of order and move to agenda item number 8, which is the board and agency policies and practices, the board handbook. If, however, we think that might be a lengthy conversation, we could also take the closed session item out of order first and move into that sort of at an early lunchtime. So what would people like to do? Mr. Liebert?
I'm going to be optimistic and say, let's do the handbook.
Okay. All right. So agenda item number, and sorry, I'm Mr. Laird. Sorry to, I don't mean to just drop this on you going out of order. Would that work for you? 'Cause
Perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item number 8 is board and agency policies and practices, the board handbook. And the presenter on this item will be our general counsel, Mr. Philip Laird. Mr. Laird, please do go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Urban. So the background for this item has been provided in the cover memo with your materials, and the concept of the board handbook is likely familiar to most, if not all members on the board. As is mentioned in the cover memo, the draft before you now is a twice revised proposal based on feedback from board members received over the past year. Having spent a good deal of time in the past record for this item, I am optimistic that we've reached a balance in many of the policies and processes contained in the draft handbook, and accordingly would encourage the board to adopt the draft. And we can also be nimble if there are tweaks discussed today. I think we can still hopefully arrive at some consensus. And as a quick reminder, the handbook is not written in stone or even have the force of a regulation, but instead is a living document that the board can revisit and amend as it sees fit over time. So while practices may be defined here, they can always be amended if the experience and preference of the board suggests a need for revision. And so really that's all I was going to say. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the board for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Laird. You may please turn your attention to the materials, which I am doing now. Comments or questions? I also want to say with regards to this draft, the first round of revisions was actually thrice amended, but the first round of revisions were before us in March, but we didn't have time to get to the item. Was it March? We didn't have time to get to the item. Those are not redlined. But then some additional suggestions are in redline. And the reason why, when I talked to Mr. Laird about this, I decided to do it that way was because the board had the document before. And as I understand, Mr. Liebert, the new items were your thoughts from after joining the board after that process. So it seemed to be the easiest way for people to pick them out. So just to explain sort of what you're looking at. So questions or comments? Mr. McTaggart.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to go through all my questions, my comments here. So I have a few. Right on page 12, this is a section 6, board member responsibilities. The third bullet point on page 12 says board members shall not discuss personnel or board business matters outside their official capacity or outside a properly noticed and agendized meeting. And so I think that needs to have some more definition, because board business matters, if someone's asking us what happened at a board meeting and, we can say, yeah, there was a vote. I feel like not being able to discuss what actually has happened and been said in public is a little too confining.
So shall not discuss personnel or board business matters with each other. Isn't that the idea? This is a Bagley-Keene.
Yeah, and perhaps redundant of Bagley-Keene compliance, which is the first bullet. But
I think, I mean, it's meant to be helpful, right? Yep. So that people see what that means.
If we could just change that to with it, okay?
And yeah, I think it was added. It now says with a majority of members. So that was meant to be the condition.
It's possibly the construction of the sentence. So.
Yeah. Okay, I can rework that. This was
put it before outside.
That's the 2 bullet points down. It says board members shall maintain the confidentiality of information which has come to their knowledge in the course of performance. And so I'm sitting here on the board right now in a public meeting. I learn information and now I have to keep it confidential. So I think it should say the confidentiality of confidential information as opposed to just information.
Absolutely, sure, we can make that. I believe this does track the statute actually of that obligation on board members, but I will make that clarification.
On the top of page 13, this is a suggestion to my fellow board members when, if you look at a lot of city councils or county councils, when the chair is gone, they sort of rotate through the other board member to represent the board or whatever. So there's a number of places where the chair can designate a person. And I would just suggest in all those places, if my fellow board members agree, that there's just a process for, kind of rotating through so that the vice chair, the person is always sort of just the next person in line. I would actually like to ask the fellow board members. I actually would like to have a change, or I'd like to suggest a change to creating subcommittees. I'd like that to be with the consent of the board, as opposed to just being the chair's discretion. Because while this chair is beyond reproach and is wonderfully impartial, I can see a world in the future where that would maybe not be the case. And so I think I'd like to suggest that it would be good practice for us to approve subcommittees. So that's the 13.
Which is honestly what we've done in practice anyway.
Right. So let's just do that anyway, I think. So that's that. Then on page 16, communications on behalf of the board. Again, just that board members represent the board and agency meetings. I don't know what the process is, but again, I don't want to go to any international meetings, but I think there should be some kind of a process where if there ever is if only 2 can go and 3 people want to go, there's sort of a rotating process there. In the second paragraph under communications on behalf of the board starts off, in the event that the board member is contacted for a statement or position of the board. This is page 16. Again, this gets back to not if I'm saying what happened. Yeah, there was a vote. If a reporter calls me and says, what happened with ADM? And I say, well, you can go look in the thing, but there was a vote and I lost it. I don't feel like I need to get permission to go say what happened. So if they're prospectively saying, how are you guys going to vote on something? And then Of course, I shouldn't be speaking for the board, but I don't think I need to sort of muzzle myself about what's happened in the past. And that aspect there is also in the second paragraph under communications on behalf of individual board members, in the middle of that paragraph where it says that they're speaking on their own behalf and not conveying a position of the board. Again, I should be able to say what's happened in the past that's happened at a public meeting. And then the top of page 17, I would suggest that the notion that we have to include this statement in any of our materials, we should be able to have a link to this statement. It's going to be, I can't put a 20-page, if I'm giving a slideshow, I can't put a 20-page document in there. So that's the second paragraph of the top of page 17, where it says that we're encouraged to, will include, and I would probably say are encouraged to include a written version. And then that third paragraph on the top of page 17, in all instances, board members who oppose any official position of the board shall always state that they're speaking on their own behalf and not conveying a position of the board or the agency. That's a little confusing to me, because when I oppose a vote, I'm opposing it in my official capacity as a board member. So I'm not, and if I'm speaking about that, I'm speaking about it in my official capacity. I voted against it. So this is weird to me. That I think that should be clarified, that I'm able to speak about the official position that I opposed as an official member of the board of the agency. And then under media inquiries to a board member about an issue related to the work of the board should be promptly referred to the executive director. And again, if it's about, like, just take that same thing, a vote that I was on the losing side of, I'm free to speak about that. So I need to be able to speak about my official positions. So if a reporter calls me about that, or a phone call,
we're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
This takes away a lot of power from the appointing authority of whichever board member it is. So I think there needs to be a distinction between speaking about official acts that have happened and describing them, especially because the reporter can always go back and look at the transcript. And in the intergovernmental communications, this is, again, the sort of same, I feel like this is very limiting, where it says in the second paragraph, this is still on page 17, additionally, inquiries and communications from government officials, including legislators, about an issue related to the work of the board should be promptly relayed. If a legislator reaches out to me and says, "Hey, what do you think about working on this matter?" I think that's my right to go talk to them about that. And I think I certainly can't go and say, "Yes, I'm representing the board and I'd love to work with you," and I can bring along the board, because I can't represent that. But at the same time, I think we need to make that clear, that there's a distinction between representing the board to the legislator, like the last sentence there is fine. Any board member communicating with a government official on behalf of the board or agency, that's fine, as authorized by the chair of the board, shall coordinate. But if you're not speaking on behalf, then I think, just speaking for me, I do this all the time. Talk to legislators about what we could get done in privacy. So those are some of my concerns, and I think they're, yeah.
Thanks, Mr. McTaggart. I think that, and this is perhaps the drafting within the, I know council's work to make, to create a draft that took into account our full conversations before, but some of this is melding together the idea of Alistair McTaggart speaking for himself, although as a board member, and speaking as the official position of the board, which is a different thing. And so there wasn't anything in here that would preclude you from speaking on your own as a board member. There is the requirement of saying, I'm speaking on my own as a board member, which I strongly support. I've worked for the government of California for a long time, and it simply avoids confusion. But there, I do not think, and there wasn't an intention, at least as I understand it from Mr. I haven't been directly involved because we have a majority of the board at this point, but there wasn't an intent to say you can't identify yourself as a board member so long as you're clear in saying this is my own position. Is that correct, Mr. Laird?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that's really key, actually, because even if people theoretically can go back to the transcript, I'm just going to say, very frankly, that's not good enough. People get confused, and they will hear things in a statement that maybe would be beneficial for them to hear, or would, for whatever reason, will think that that is the agency's position or the board's position, and that's what we need to avoid. Yes, Mr. Liebert?
Thank you, Board Member McTaggart, for those comments. I have a feeling, and perhaps our General Counsel can confirm this, that all of those are really drafting issues that can be accommodated, and I would personally be supportive of those clarifications exactly as you just mentioned, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that we are not changing from
Right.
You do not speak
No,
on
I
behalf
don't
of the
think
board
that was.
unless we've agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that our fellow board member ever had that intention. Yeah, so it's really just a drafting issue, and then it's a process issue whether we can, if we all do end up on a consensus that the document as clarified with those points by Board Member McTaggart, if we can approve that today under those circumstances, or if you're more comfortable seeing the updated draft language. That's, to me, that would be the issue if there is a consensus. But I would urge that we find a path to actually approve the handbook with those clarifications.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. Mr. McTaggart, for you, and Mr. Lay? Okay.
Yeah, I read, the sections on page 15, 16, kind of the same way as the chair, as not really requiring, like not being as restrictive as perhaps, you can interpret it to be, but I will, so I'm not sure we need to even fix that because it's pretty clear it's, it's of the board, conveying a position of the board. And I've been being like, this is my thought as a board member, is not the agencies. So, to the extent we want to correct it, I think it's clear enough here. But the whole written statement of the written version of the statement, the materials, I think encourage is good, or a shorter version of the statement. I think that's fair. And then on that last part on page 17, in all instances, board members who oppose any official position of the board shall always state that they are speaking on their own behalf and not conveying a position of, maybe you want to say the full board or agency, but I still think it's fine as is.
I just don't agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's fine as is.
The legal lines are important. And yes, I'm completely, I think it would be, to the extent that Mr. McTaggart thinks that we are understanding what his concern was, then wordsmithing it to make it less lawyerly or something and easier to parse. I mean, that would be something I would certainly support as long as Mr. Laird said that we can do it that way. Mr. McTaggart?
Yeah, so when I look at for example, the media inquiries, it says media inquiries to a board member about an issue related to the work of the board. Well, all of privacy is related to the work of the board. And it specifically says, and then you go and tell them, and you refer them, and you don't talk. Well, it's
optional. It's a guidance. Guidance
should be promptly referred.
Should
Yeah.
Not shall.
Okay, I don't want to agree to something that I'm not going to agree to. I mean, I wouldn't.
Why? Encouraged to?
Why? But actually, I would like the freedom to talk to reporters or whoever about privacy in California. It's kind of one of the things I've done. So I'm not going to all of a sudden say yes every time I get a reporter. I'm going to go refer it to the agency.
Rather than should, perhaps may.
I had suggested are encouraged to. I mean, everybody is not as immersed in the issues or as, experienced in speaking with media. The idea of the handbook is to provide guidance and ideas about how we operate to people who are new to the board. Ms. White.
Thank you so much, Chair Urban. Just to quickly, really the intent here is that the board provide staff a heads up if you're going to speak with the media, particularly for myself and Ms. Mahoney, because if you were to speak to the legislature too, it's just good so we're aware. Just wanted to clarify, that's really the intent here.
The problem is, it says, whether it's a legislator or a federal government official or anybody, it says you should. So then you're in the position of being in a situation where you're ignoring the board guidelines if you don't. And I just don't want to be in that position. I'm happy to, if I just feel like, I just think the language of should is way too strong. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to be bound by this, because I actually don't think it's the right policy. I think, so I disagree with it. So if we could soften that language somehow, and that would, and make it clear that as a board member, I'm allowed to speak about anything that has happened, and I'm allowed to represent anything that has happened on the board. I feel like that's kind of basic. All of our, one of the reasons we've been appointed by different authorities is to be able to have different voices on it.
Absolutely, Board Member McTaggart. Our goal here is certainly not to muffle the board. You all are very smart. You have these positions for a reason. It's simply so that the agency is aware of what board members are doing so we can best respond and coordinate responses on our end.
Thank you. Mr. Worth?
So he's pretty clear, right? Are we willing to modify the language to say that we'll endeavor to inform staff? But, and I think, Chair, you had, actually, I think Board Member Taggart had some idea of, I don't know what the right word is. Some of us shouldn't speak to media on certain subjects. Some of us should. So we have to put some language in that accommodates his request, I think. And the only other point I had was in the very beginning under the purpose statement, it really only talks about amending this if we add additional policies. I think what my understanding is we could just amend this, because if we find out the language a year from now as written isn't working, I'd like to go back and be able to change it. That's the only other point I had.
Sure, thank you. And obviously what might have seemed clear, this discussion shows it maybe it wasn't as clear. Mr. Lay?
Perhaps one thought for that section is, instead of encourage, is like in the best judgment as needed. So like if you think like, oh, the agency is going to be blindsided by this interview I just gave, maybe that's when you would inform the agency or something like that.
Can I ask for a point of clarification though? Mr. McTaggart, is your concern, it sounds like, not about informing staff that you spoke with the media, for instance, but the idea that you would have to refer media to speak with staff instead of you, or is it that because I think from an efficiency standpoint, as Ms. White mentioned, we inevitably get the call immediately after saying, Mr. McTaggart just said that. Right. How does staff respond? And as a result, our time then gets consumed by that. So I think what we're looking for is a balance, just understanding you certainly have your autonomy, but I think we, just recognizing it does have impacts on staff and sort of how our day gets structured when individual board members are speaking sort of with media or with legislators.
I actually think I've been very, very circumspect, and I don't think I've done that to you guys this year. So I don't think that the implication is not at all that I've done that.
No, absolutely. Sorry. I guess I just want to clarify, if we're aligned on that though, then I think that's what.
So I've tried to do my best, but at the same time, I don't feel like I'm worried about a sin of omission. And so I just would prefer it to be, first of all, not saying that we're supposed to do it. And secondly, if it says, you may, it'd be helpful if we did. Something like that. I worry about being in a situation where I'm supposed to do something. Right now it says I'm supposed to call you guys first, and the implication is I'm not supposed to talk. So I totally disagree with. And so I just feel like there needs to be more language around the fact that we all have our individual voices, and we're allowed to talk about privacy. We're allowed to talk about matters in front of the board. We're allowed to talk about matters, in the state. We're allowed to talk to legislators, and I think that's a good thing, frankly. And I just think it wouldn't be very much effort for you to soften this a little bit and send us a red line. And I think that could be a pretty easy thing. I know I'm probably not a favorite person for saying that, but I even just the stuff around like how we're going to approve committees and all the rest of it, I think there's enough changes there that where we can, I'd prefer to see a red line myself.
Apologies, I thought I turned that off. Mr. Worth, I've lost the language that you had. So there, I like the judgment idea too, but you had a language that wasn't quite encouraged.
You liked my language?
I did.
Because now I forgot it too.
Okay.
But I think we have somebody who remembers.
Yeah, we do. And Mr. McTaggart, just to be clear, I've been keeping track, and I was thinking that all of those changes could be made. Yeah.
On this last point, I totally get your concern. And I would just suggest that part of this, frankly, is training board members as they come on like me, that we very much appreciate the staff will inform me, as the executive director has in the past, that if you're going to talk to press or to members and you think it'll be useful to staff to be aware of this, please let us know. That's totally optional. But ultimately, I understand what board member McTaggart is saying. And I think, Jeff, the ideas are encouraged when you deem it appropriate to share with the staff that this has occurred. But it's totally up to us as individual board members to use our judgment. I'm certain of that. I too would not feel comfortable being criticized when I've used my judgment talking to a staffer in the legislature about some issue, that somehow I'm required to make sure that I let Megan know. But I'm going to use my judgment and typically tell Megan. And so I think it's kind of a training issue as well. But it is a judgment call on the part of us board members.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. Okay, so making clear to Mr. Worth's request that the handbook can be amended should we decide to revisit it, not just the policies within it. And adjusting for Mr. McTaggart's preferences regarding the appointment of subcommittees and how people are chosen to do various things, and adjusting the language on media and legislative inquiries to be clearer than apparently it was, that this is really about giving staff a heads up and making sure that it's clear to all involved that when you're speaking as a board member yourself, you're not speaking for the whole agency or the board on a position the board would vote on. Did I miss anything? Oh, yes, and making the bullet point on Bagley Keene more scannable. Okay. All right.
That's a great motion.
I have to say it first, though. May I have a motion to request and direct staff to make the adjustments as we discussed in our conversation today and that I just listed out 30 seconds ago, and then to adopt the board handbook as amended?
I make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Liebert. May I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Mr. Worth has seconded. Mr. Sultani, did you need something? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yes, the mics. We're doing our best to everyone who's watching. I would like to invite public comments on this item.
This is for agenda item number 8. If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 8. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Marzian. And in that case, may I ask that you conduct the roll call vote?
Yes.
Before we do that, Mr. McTaggart?
Yeah, sorry. And I just want to say I appreciate that, and I will hope we'll work in the best positive frame of mind. I just would like to say that I hope I have the right to come back if the edits come back and I feel they're missing something, that I have the right to bring that up again in the future. Oh, okay.
That was the first item. Ms. Marzian, could you please conduct the roll call vote?
Board Member Lay,
Aye.
Board Member Liebert,
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart,
Aye.
Board Member Worth,
Aye.
Chair Urban.
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeses.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Marzian, and thank you to the board for the discussion and for everyone. And I thank in absentia, absent previous members of the board for careful attention to this. I do think that the handbook contains policies, it contains law. It also just contains sort of guidance about how we will operate amongst one another. And it is important as a statement of the board's operation, as well as a handy place to have all those policies and laws in place. So it's fairly complicated, and I thank everybody for that. With that, I think what I will do is call the closed session item, which is on your agenda, as agenda item number 10. And as we do, in order to try to help everyone have the most efficient day as possible when we have a closed session item, is we will work on this in closed session over lunch, or while other folks who won't be joining us in the public can take lunch. This closed session item for today will include a discussion and possible action on the appointment of an executive director under authority of Government Code Section 11126 A1, and pursuant to Government Code Section 1126 E1 and 2A, the board will meet in closed session as well to confer and receive advice from legal counsel regarding litigation for which disclosing the names would jeopardize the agency's ability to conclude existing settlement negotiations to its advantage. So the board will momentarily leave this space to convene in closed session. We'll keep the public meeting room and the Zoom meeting open. And members of the public may come and go as you please. We will not reconvene. We don't know exactly how long the closed session will take, but I always try to give some estimate so people know they can run and get a coffee or a lunch or something if they're not part of the discussion. We will not reconvene before 1:15 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you when we're back from closed session. Welcome back, everyone. The board is now returning from closed session. I'm pleased to report out in the public meeting that during our closed session items, the board has decided to appoint Ms. Tiffany Garcia as our interim executive director during the time period while we are engaging a new executive director after Mr. Soltani leaves. And we greatly thank Ms. Garcia for this service when she does take over. With that, we will turn now to agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 7 is the delegation of authority that will be necessary for Ms. Garcia to act in the name of the agency between meetings, and that will be presented by our Assistant Chief Counsel, Ms. Tamara Colson. Ms. Colson, thank you, and please go ahead. Not yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try to stay close to the microphone. So initially, this board had delegated certain authority to Executive Director Soltani. So in order for your interim executive director to take on all of those day-to-day operations for you and to keep the agency running smoothly, we'll need to make those same delegations to her and revoke those that were made to Mr. Soltani. It's my understanding that his last day will be January 16th, and so she will take over January 17th. Not today, so we'll need a motion that delegates those authorities and does it by appointing her as of January 17th and revoking his as of January 16th.
Thank you, Ms. Colson. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Well, if there are no questions, then I'd like to propose a motion that pursuant to Civil Code Section 1798.199.35, the California Privacy Protection Agency Board delegates to the agency's interim executive director, Tiffany Garcia, the authority to act in the name of the agency between meetings to the extent necessary for the efficient day-to-day administration of the agency. This delegation includes, but is not limited to, the authority to conduct probable cause hearings, hire a chief privacy auditor and other staff, and to certify regulations for submission to the Office of Administrative Law. As required by law, this delegation does not allow for the interim executive director to resolve enforcement actions or exercise the board's rulemaking authority. The interim executive director may further delegate this authority to staff as necessary for the agency's operations to comply with the applicable legal requirements and operational needs. The delegation shall become effective on January 17th, 2025, and the prior delegations to Ashkan Soltani are revoked as of January 16th, 2025. This delegation shall continue until rescinded or modified by the board, or until a non-interim executive director assumes the duties of executive director, at which time this delegation shall transfer to the non-interim executive director. Okay. Questions or comments, or do I have the motion?
I so move.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Lay and a second from Mr. Liebert. Is there public comment on this item?
This is for agenda item number 7. And if you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you are joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 7. Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marzion. With that, the motion carry. Oh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself. Thank you, Ms. Marzion. And would you please conduct the vote?
Yes. Board Member Lay?
Aye.
Board Member Liebert?
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart?
Aye.
Board Member Worth?
Aye.
Chair Urban?
Aye.
You have 5 yeses.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marzion and the board. The motion carries with a vote of 5-0. And thank you, Ms. Marcia, for stepping into this role when necessary. With that, let's move to agenda item number, apologies, I've lost my place on my agenda. 9. Agenda item number 9, which is our item for future agenda items. We have a number on the list that I mentioned last meeting. I'm happy to go over them again or not. And we talked a little bit more today about the adequacy, the possibility of an adequacy designation for California. And Ms. Mahoney mentioned again the possibility of European Commission officials being willing to talk to us about requirements there. So that's something that's come up that is on the agenda. We have our regularized rulemaking calendar in place, and my list from last time, which is being operationalized. Do board members have any additional agenda items they would like to suggest for future discussion? No? All right, thank you. In that case, I'd like to invite public comment on potential agenda items for future meetings. As a reminder, the board can only deliberate or discuss whether or not to put these items on a future agenda. We cannot discuss an item directly today.
This is for agenda item number 9, future agenda items. If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please raise your hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9 if you are joining us by phone. This is for agenda item number 9. I believe we have a hand raised.
Thank you.
Anya, I'm going to unmute you at this time. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, so please begin as soon as you're ready.
Sorry, this wasn't a comment. I just would you mind repeating the items again?
Hold on one moment. I'm not hearing you.
Hello? Hello?
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, now we can hear you. Thank you.
It wasn't a comment. I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind repeating the items really quick.
The future agenda items?
Yes.
Oh, the list from last time?
Yes.
Give me just a second. I need to access it. Thank you. I really do appreciate the request. I'm being directed to, or requested, and I think this is right, to direct you to the website for the meeting materials for the November 8 meeting. The transcript records everything, and I think that's a good idea because there's always the possibility that I jotted it down not exactly right, and so it's important to have the information from the official source. So thank you for that. Any other comments from the public?
Madam Chair, I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Marzian, and thank you for the question. With that, our final agenda item is number 11, adjournment. I would like to thank everyone, the board members, staff, and members of the public for all of your contributions to the meeting and to the board's work. I want to one more time express our gratitude to Mr. Sultani, since this is his last board meeting, probably, and just mention again how grateful we are for your work and delighted we have been to work with you. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Liebert and a second from Mr. Lay. Ms. Marzian, could you please conduct the vote?
Board Member Lay?
Aye.
Board Member Liebert?
Aye.
Board Member McTaggart?
Aye.
Board Member Worth?
Aye.
Chair Urban?
Aye.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeses.
Thank you. The motion has been approved by a vote of 5-0. This meeting of the California Privacy Protection Agency Board stands adjourned. Thank you very much.